Welcome to Slash Forward. Time to sit back and relax, because in this episode, we're going to enjoy a much more natural biological process as we continue our exploration of interspecial conception with the 1981 banger Inseminate. If you're interested in more twin studies involving human-alien hybrids, please subscribe to the channel. Let's get to it. We open in space, listening to the narration of a space log. While investigating an abandoned prior expedition, the Outpost team has found a strange tomb-like structure. So now they're doing that first thing, but also happily seeing what they can learn about the prior inhabitants of this planet. We start with a couple of explorers, basking in the warmth of this dual star system, pausing occasionally to snag some really terrific samples. Dean happens upon a wall carving.
Can you read it? Can you make it out?
Well, no, Dean, it's an alien culture, but as he ventures further down and in, the radios start to get a bit spotty. He tries to call back to Ricky when some sort of light phenomenon approaches, which then just skeets in his face. This really gets the ladies scrambling as Ricky is brought back for treatment. Dean's whereabouts are currently unknown. Holly immediately lays into Gary about the problems with communications, which he suggests were subject to some sort of frequency block.
Damn it, that can't be right.
Gary, you ignorant slut. Holly then heads to the medbay for an update, but the doc is too busy carefully preserving the crystals to talk now. Meanwhile, some of the others have suited up and are attempting to evacuate Dean's corpse. Before they have any new info, Holly is interviewed by the Chief Information Officer, introducing some more characters and giving a nice recap of the plot so far. Then there's a huge announcement. Dean has been found.
Is he dead?
Yeah, mostly. During the mess hall debrief, Mitch wants to get back in that corridor to examine them inscriptions. He suggests that they imply the previous race believed in a twin-heavy mythology, which is very interesting to him. But then they discuss the pros and cons of risking their safety over this versus finishing the work they came to do in the limited time they have before the transport comes to get them. Holly ultimately decides that the unknown energy fields lie beyond the scope of their mission, calls it off, instead requesting the Outpost chiropractor distract the crew with massage and manual adjustments. Then, to add a couple more identical characters to the roster, Gale calls Mark to request that he and Sandy go investigate an electrical disturbance in the lab, but they opt to forgo any sort of technical investigation and instead investigate each other's anatomy, with some full-body hugging. Meanwhile, the crystals are going nuts nearby, causing Ricky to heat up like a furnace. The doc runs across Ricky, who we learn is searching for his tunnel bro, Dean. He's determined to find him even if it means killing all who stand in his way. To that end, he proceeds to administer head trauma to all challengers before running off. Right when they have him cornered, they split off on separate paths, leaving brunette male to explore in solitude. This makes it fairly easy for the Rickster to slip by and hop on the travel carts, which he uses to get away at a moderate speed. But this is primarily attributable to Holly not keeping up on her cardio. He then locks himself in the cavern where old Gare just keeps a close eye on him from the camera room. He wanders around until he comes across Gale, who gets her foot all jammed up in the scuffle. With the outer door open, they struggle to find a way to override the airlock and get to her.
Gail, you must get here quickly.
She's trying, damn you! With her thermal regulator busted, Gary carefully instructs her to connect the blue and yellow wires while the others yell at her.
You have to do it yourself!
Holly, please! As her temperature drops and the tension rises, Gale takes their advice to heart and grabs her fate by the tail, sucking off her oxygen tube while trying to hew her foot to save herself. While I applaud the effort, the outcome is indicated by everyone walking away disappointed. Back out at the site, Ricky starts tossing rocks around, sending that one chick back to the airlock. The sight of Gale sends her into a tizzy, allowing Ricky to catch up with her before she can seal the airlock's outer door. But not one to go out like a bitch, Kate blasts his ass with a dart gun. After everyone is settled, she finds herself trying to justify her actions, as if they didn't all see Ricky go crazy and risk everyone's lives. The doctor diagnoses Ricky with crystal paranoia, a common defect in these types of outposts. But they wisely decide to collect a few more samples just to be sure. After the space funeral, they get back to business. Mitch comes to the conclusion there's something out there, feeding on the crystal's energy, so they go out to explore, understanding this time that they'll lose audio if they stray too far. Despite this, Sandy pretends like she understands Mitch. And then splits off on her own. She's pursued by an ominous shadow, which she leads back to Mitch, who is then victimized in brutal fashion. Sandy then finds herself on an examination table where she hallucinates the doc is doing stuff to her. But no trust breaking here, it's actually this thing, essentially inserting a heaping dose of pickled eggs into her. She wakes up in the med bay and responds to all their questions with full-mouthed yarbling. In response, they go ahead and sedate her and let her get some rest. When she finally comes to later, she's feeling nauseated and dehydrated, and she has an unidentified identifiable arm wound. The doc goes to report out on his findings to Holly, and here we learn that she's also 2 months preggers, despite anti-pregnancy injections being part of their normal monthly physicals. Later outside, seismic events turn the tomb into dust, pretty much ending their expedition at this point. So now they occupy their time with various leisure activities while awaiting further contact from the transport. Sandy mills about and finds herself being drawn to the energy of the crystals and basks in their green glow. Then she makes a pit stop at the restroom where a quick flash causes her to thrash Barbara. I didn't know that's what goes on in the ladies' room. Not fully satisfied, she then goes ahead and opens her up to air out her insides, but she seems to regret doing it, which is kinda good. Holly walks in and bears witness to the grisly scene. Sandy doesn't appreciate her judgmental stares, so she chases her off while the boys puzzle over the feminine mystique. Then a very generic announcement goes out warning everyone to lock down and admit no personnel into your room, without specifying that they're avoiding Sandy. Holly then calls Mark to tell him what happened to Barbara and asks him to get Sharon.
But where's Sharon?
More importantly, who is Sharon? While Sandy takes a brief moment to note the newfound rotundness of her womb, Mark arrives and very aggressively tries to gain admittance to Sharon's quarters. She rightly refuses his request until she confirms it with Holly, who then instructs them to get food from the mess hall before coming to the control bridge. Sandy then goes to the medical freezer where we see that she stokes the fires of her super metabolism by eating Dean. Once fueled up, she's ready to go do some stalking, so she sneaks about and takes out some of the security cameras. While this is going on, the others group up and discuss her possible motivations for doing this. But then they ask Kate her opinion and realize that she's not there. Her ears must have been burning because she wakes up at just that moment. And it doesn't even matter that she's not privy to the danger, because when Sandy hops out at her, she doesn't hesitate to deliver some brutal karate to her face and liver. Then the boys arrive and Gary tees off, thirsty for some violence. But he finds out that Sandy's got a chin. This leaves them to ponder the best way to resolve this, which can be interpreted as the best way to kill Sandy. But while they're messing about with this, she's putting explosive charges all up in their shit, causing them to go on high alert when they're set off. Holly wants to go and restrain her with the burn gun so the doc can sedate her. While they work this out, she takes a moment to cry in the corner as her brain attempts to swell clean out of her cranium. After gearing up, they walk very curtly down the corridors. Once they find her, they waste plenty of time trying to soothe her, which is an obvious mistake because she predictably turns on them. And with Holly's limited trigger discipline, she ends up burning a hole in the doc's back, leaving him vulnerable to taking a dumbbell to the dome. Sandy then turns on Holly, who begs for help. Sharon helps in the only way she knows how, by running away. If it was to get help, she apparently forgot because she never mentions to anyone what happened. Now Sandy's fully leaning into this whole situation, requesting through the intercom that they all just come on out and meet her, since they can't go anywhere anyway. Gary and Kate then enact a plan to sneak out the back to find supplies. They make it a good way, but run across Holly's body, causing Kate to let out a scream. They continue on and get their hands on some sweet melee weapons, but then Sandy catches up with them. Gary immediately goes for the gun smash and is disturbingly satisfied about his choice. Afterward, they somehow get split up, and Kate finds herself crouching in a corner clutching a jumpsuit. Sandy finds her here, but Gary is able to lay down a sufficient distraction to ensure their escape. Then the tables are momentarily turned when Gary gets at her with some hedge clippers, and then he heads for the sanctuary of open space. Feeling assured of his safety, he just hangs out here for a minute while Sandy decides to do some limits testing, discovering that she can easily breathe in the atmosphere now. With it now obviously over, she wastes no time harpooning Gary with a bolt gun. In his confusion, he summons the audacity to make a request.
Help me.
But she just watches him die slow before taking a little nibble of his soft parts to fuel her growing body. And now, Mark has had enough. He's ding-dang-diddly mad, and he goes tearing off through the outpost like a wild beast and sets explosive charges along the way. Luckily, he's allowed to do this at his leisure, as elsewhere, Sandy's reaching the end of the gestation period. She works her pants off with her feet and begins to scream thrust that sucker out of her. Now, if I can take just a moment of your time, I have to say that we have certainly observed our fair share of Ute splats in various videos. But here, for the first time, we bear witness to an actual emergence from the birth canal in all its gentle beauty. And that makes us all parents now. When Mark arrives, we see that it was twins. Remember that? It's important now, somehow. In the subsequent chase, Sandy manages to snag his transmitter and starts scooping up all the cherry bombs and placing them around the control room door, while she's busy blasting open the door and really trashing the set that the crew worked so hard on. Mark circled back to scoop up her babies. They stash useless Sharon with the twins and plan on lying in wait for Sandy's inevitable arrival. But Mark doesn't understand waiting, so he runs at full speed down the hall, but does manage to intercept Sandy and ineffectually swat at her head. She employs an ancient technique, biting her assailant below the knee to interrupt his chi and render him unconscious. Kate then disarms herself and runs, right into the concussive blast of the explosive. Mark wakes back up and does his very best to run with his knee now in pieces, and succumbs to an unexpected work hazard. In this lower chamber, he manages to eventually sloppily wrap a wire harness around Sandy's neck, thus rendering her deceased. He stumbles back to check in on Sharon and the kiddos and finds her in the process of being consumed, before he is also attacked. Then we end with a new crew on yet another mission to check on the abandoned outpost that was checking on an abandoned outpost. They don their most aggressive BMX helmets and explore, noting total destruction of the facility and several mutilated bodies. And as they attempt to wrap things up, we see that Tex has acquired a couple of stowaways on the ship. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch, and I'd like to take a moment to give a huge thanks to my donors memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. Inseminate is a true goodly bad movie, because it's not just that it creates a poor presentation, it's that all the actors are being completely earnest while turning in truly baffling performances. It's one of those films where it's right on the edge of almost making it, but then falls flat on its face while farting on the way down. What I'm saying is I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.